And good morning, goslings and geese and ganders, and all of you out there, whatever kind of goose you might happen to be. Anyway, I need some help from you this evening. I'm trying a new microphone. If you're having any trouble hearing me, or if it sounds weird, or any of that, things like that, would you please check in with me, drop me a note. I think I've got everything hooked up and set up and got the gain where it needs to be and all that. But I'm not sure, and I won't be even when I'm reading. So let me know. Drop me a hint and tell me if that's what's going on. You can see I even have a earphone in tonight just to have a more practical way of assessing my volume levels and stuff while I'm figuring out this new microphone. It was a birthday present, so I was actually wasn't in need of a new microphone, but I have a better microphone now. So you're going to get an even more realistic dose of what I actually sound like. So perhaps that was why the gift was given to me, so that the people who listen to me online should have to suffer in an even more realistic way, like my own family does. So anyway, but whatever the case may be, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever part of the world that you might be in, and welcome. I'm Tad. I'm going to be reading. Before I do that, let me think. Is there anything that I need to fill you folks in on? There's a ton of stuff going on, but it's all sort of behind the scenes-y stuff that isn't really all that interesting to explain. We finally, I mentioned last week that I'd gotten my share of the proofs done, and then I got a whole batch of other corrections from my very kind and very helpful readers. And they sent them to me, and all of a sudden I had like twice as many corrections to hand over to Daw. So they all had to be interpolated into the manuscript and stuff like that. But that got done in the beginning of the week, and I had several other interesting phone calls about various kinds of things, which if or when they turn into anything, I will be sure to let everybody know. Anything else? We went out, finally had my birthday dinner. We waited until the weekend for various reasons having to do with other family members of our immediate family being absent. We went out and did that tonight. That was really nice. We had a good time just hanging out and eating food and stuff like that and telling stories, and it was nice. One of the nice things, or at least something that I've always felt very strongly about, is I was raised with a family which, I don't know, we like each other. We like each other. We get along. A lot of that has to do, obviously, with my parents and probably with their parents before them, my grandparents. But whatever the reasons, we've always gotten along well, and I genuinely enjoy spending. I mean, I'm sure this is not unusual. I'm sure this is not some weird thing, and everybody's going, really? He likes his family? But, I mean, I enjoy my family. I enjoy my parents. I enjoy my brothers and their respective families, their wives and kids. And I really enjoy my family. And, we're getting to the age where the kids are starting to think about moving out and what they're going to do next and all that. And while on the one hand, I can comment that Deb in particular is completely ready to redo all their rooms. Deb's already planning that stuff. We have reached a point in our lives where we wouldn't mind having a little more space and a little less mess and a little less noise and things like that. But God, I'm going to miss them. They're funny. They are a funny bunch. And, plus, not to mention the fact, and this is one of the other things, is that having young people around keeps you connected to things that you might not know about otherwise. And that it doesn't matter if you're online or not. It has to do with what's important to the current young generation, which you don't really find out that much, or in anything other than a very superficial way, unless you have young people living around you. And if I'm throwing out weird generalizations, I think that's one of the reasons that traditionally men have had more problems in retirement than women, because for so long in our culture, men were focused on the job and being the breadwinner and all that kind of stuff. Not that they always were. I mean, God knows, my mom was a single mom for a while. But in general, that was kind of the societal idea of what a man should be. Whereas because women's focus was supposed to be the home, and usually had to be, even if they had jobs, they still were expected to kind of keep the house running. And because of that, they, were more involved with the family on a day to day basis. And as a result, they were around the kids more and then around the grandkids more. And because of that, and again, this is just my personal idea. I'm not claiming this is true or anything, but it seems to me like women stayed more in contact with the movement of time and the changes of life and all that kind of thing in a way that men traditionally did not as much. We all know the old cliche of, men coming home from work and everybody kind of scuttling around, going, oh, daddy's home, don't disturb him, and all that stuff, and which was nonsense. But as a result, I think that in general, a lot of men of the generation before mine used to come home when they'd finally retired and didn't really have that same kind of connection into the ongoing life of their families and the ongoing change of society that you view through your kids from the time they first, start watching television or go to school or whatever, and then you see all through their lives, and then when they become adults, and if they have kids, then you see through their kids, what the generation after is interested in. So anyway, so in one sense, when our kids do finally move out, of course I will miss them, and it will also be a benchmark of life. We will no longer be the parents of children who live at home, but it will also be a change. And I worry slightly, or I fear slightly, that I will miss them. Of course I will miss them, but I will also miss out on certain things that they bring to me simply by being in the same household with me, and us being a family who talks about things and likes to share memes and stuff like that. Anyway, so that's what I was thinking about tonight, just because I was, we were out for dinner with the family, and we went to a traditional local place that we go to and all that, and it was just kind of a blast of nostalgia in a lot of ways, and very enjoyable. Anyway, so I don't really have that much to say tonight because in terms of telling you news on things, because I'm kind of in between a couple of things. Basically done with Narrow Dark now, except I have to do still like the acknowledgments and things like that. But that's not doesn't take very long, and I have to have it done in the next few days anyway. And then I'm getting back to work on Navigator's Children. But, and then the other kinds of things I've been on the phone talking with people about are all, well, this might happen one day, or, hey, if such and such came up, might you be interested in that, and those kinds of things. And there's not really anything to report there until such a time as something happens to turn into something. So that's not really anything to pass along. And the animals are the animals, the kids are the kids. Deb and I are Deb and I, and we continue to hang in and stay out of trouble as best we can. Anyway, so I'm going to check in and see who is on the board tonight, who has come by to visit. And I see Ronnie is there. And hello, Ronnie, good to see you. Ray, hello, greetings to you. And Chris, good morning, and thanks again as always for your Facebook work, much appreciated. Jerry, Mr. Unangst. Okay, we have to do that; it's important. Ilva, good morning to you, sweetie. How are you? And hello, yes, to all the fellow Tad folk. I guess you're not Tad folk all the time, but when you're gathered here, then you're at least temporary Tad folk. I don't otherwise claim credit for your lives or any legal responsibility or financial, I hasten to say. So, if you're going to go out and run over a bunch of school children or something, don't tell them it was anything to do with me, because it wasn't. But while you're here gathered with me, I consider you to be part of the extended Tad family, whatever the heck that is and whatever the heck that's worth. Anyway, Hazel, speaking of family, there's some honest to goodness family. There is my mother-in-law. Good morning, sweetie. Good to see you. I know Deb talked to you today, and I got some of the news secondhand. And please tell niece Rhiannon how proud we are. That sounds really great. Anyway, and this is Deb's niece, the daughter of our of her youngest sister. Like me, Deb is the oldest of three, and Rhiannon, who is Lisa's daughter, Lisa and Chris's daughter, and Hazel's grandchild, and Deb's and my niece, is going great guns working in journalism and has just been offered a really nice new job and stuff like that. So we're very proud of her. Anyway, who else is out there? Anamika, hello. Good morning to you. Ray, yes, yes. Oh, you're late and you need sleep, of course. Understood. If you've not already gone to sleep, I urge you to hurry off to sleep because sleep is a good thing, and I do it whenever I can. Holger, good morning and greetings to you in Waldesruhe. Yeah, I know. We hate the time change. We actually, one of the most ghastly people in the country just did a decent thing for once in his life. This is one of our American senators who just put in a bill to get rid of the shift back and forth with daylight savings time. And this, I'm not going to go into the name. I'm not going to tell you who it is. You can find out if you want to. But and also because I don't want to turn it into politics. But he happens to be somebody who I've never agreed with on anything ever, and probably never will again on anything other than the very basics of life, whatever those might be. Like eating food is good, not dying is good, that kind of stuff. But I had to, somebody had to do this, and for this one time only, I give this person an exemption from my loathing, and say, well done. We really the whole daylight savings back and forth thing is way done as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, so yes, Holger, I agree. It's no fun. Christina, hello. Good morning to you. And Petra cannot make it but says hello. Well, tell Petra I said that's okay. That's her one chance. That's her one screw up that she's allowed. And then after that, no more Tad. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, everybody has scheduling issues, and that's why we're recording it, and that's why Chris is being kind enough to put it on his YouTube channel. So hello, Christina, and please say hello to Petra for me. Good evening, Wouter. Good evening also from Iris. Thank you, Iris. And did my dad ever find out the Otherland series are dedicated to him? Oh, God. Some people have heard the story. I'll tell it in just a second. Let me say hello to the other folks here, and then I'll tell you the Otherland thing in a condensed version before I start reading. So who else have we got here? Ray had a question I saw, and I slooped past it accidentally. There we go. Not sure if you remember, but you sent me one or two autographed copies of the Shadow March series while you were deployed in Iraq in the early 2000s. Yes, Ray, actually, I did remember that. I knew your name, and I knew in a general sense that I had sent you some books overseas, although whether you were in Iraq or whether you were in Afghanistan or somewhere in the Middle East or whatever, I wasn't quite sure. But I did recognize the name, and I am very glad you happen to be back in stateside now. I'm well, actually, no, that may not be true, because I remember the other day you were talking about the hours that you were dealing with, and it was something odd. But anyway, we'll figure this out at some other point. So especially if you're tired and going to bed. But yes, I did remember your name, and I remembered I had sent you books, but I didn't remember specifically that it was Iraq. Anyway, but it's a great pleasure that you're here and well and all that, and that I get to see you regularly. So thanks for reminding me. Jeremy, hello. Good to see you. Yeah, that's pretty good. Hertie Schafflinger. Anyway, hello, Hertie. Love to see you. Lovely to see you. Why is that saying hide? I don't want to hide it. What a stupid thing. How do you get rid of that? Oh, God. Did it hide it? Well, Hertie, thank God I got a chance to say hello to you before it hit it. I'm still figuring these things out. Anyway, and Holger I already said hello to, and Ronnie I already said hello to. So apparently we're keeping, Ronnie's asking about if we're keeping daylight time or not. Apparently the current version, although there will still be arguing about this before it gets settled, but apparently the current version is to keep daylight savings time, to make for longer days, I guess, in the I don't know. I can't, the whole thing confuses me. It's funny because I have, my brain works fairly well, I mean, I'm actually, I'm not stupid, but the daylight saving stuff always just puzzles me when people explain it to me. Well, you see, it's because then we have more hours. I'm going like, but no, you don't have more hours. You're just shifting when the hours are. So you're essentially betting one time of the year against another. You're either giving yourself more daylight during, anyway, at certain times of the year, but you're giving yourselves more nighttime too. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to explain. It's hard to explain to me. Let's put it that way. It's hard to explain to me because, frankly, I don't care. I just want it to stop. Or, no, I take that back. What I want is I want it always to be autumn. I want it always to be that, once a year you get an extra hour. That's what I want. I don't want to have to give that hour back. That's the part I hate. It's the spring part where you have to jump forward and give your hour back, or whatever, however it works. But I like the autumn part. I like, at 2 o'clock at night, when I'm 2 o'clock in the morning, when I'm kind of rolling around the house doing my thinking or whatever. I like it then when it becomes 1 o'clock. Now that's cool. If we could just keep that part and eliminate all the other part, where you have to give it back again, and where, all one day you're minding your own business and it turns 2 a.m. and then at the same second it becomes 3 a.m. And no, I don't like that. Anyway, to go back to the earlier question, which was, God, what is this? I don't want to hide that. Why is it saying hide it? I want to show it. Yes. No, God, what is this? Go away. No, I'm sorry. Herty, it looks like it just, for some reason, no, I don't want it blocked. God, help me. You poor, no, I don't want to hide the message. Anyway, oh, God. Sorry. Every time I'm working with something new, it makes me feel like, oh, one of those poor old people who can't figure out technology. I'm like, drop dead. I was doing technology before you. Before you were born, you young whippersnapper. Anyway, so the question was from Voucher. Voucher asked if my dad ever found out about the Otherland series. Okay, where that comes from, for those who don't know. Many of you who've heard me speak in Germany, because I used to get asked about this a lot. The first volume says, this book is dedicated to my father, Joseph Hill Evans, with love. Actually, I'm still reading it. Actually, Dad doesn't read fiction, so if someone doesn't tell him about this, he'll never know. Now, my dad is a classic science dude, okay? My dad is a polymer chemist, or was a polymer chemist. He's been retired for a while now. And does not read fiction. The only other fiction that I knew of that he had ever read was actually also a science fiction novel when he was stuck in the hospital with my mom giving birth to my younger brother, Stuart. He read a book called The War with the Newts. The War with the Newts, which was written by Karl Kopek, who is actually this guy who coined the phrase robot. He coined the word robot to mean a mechanical person, because it comes from the Czech word. He was Czech. It comes from the Czech word for worker. Robot does. Anyway, so that's just a little science fictional trivial thing. But so my dad, that was like the last work of fiction, and my younger brother was born in 1963 or something like that. So that was the last work of fiction he'd read. So I really knew that even though I was dedicating the books to him, he hadn't read any of my books. He doesn't read fiction. So I knew there was a very strong chance that unless somebody told him, he would never realize it. So I thought, I won't make a big deal out of it. I'll just wait to see. Anyway, this turned into a subject of some interest. Witness Voucher is still asking about it all these years later. And people, as I was traveling, because at this time I was doing a lot of traveling, I was in Australia and New Zealand, and I was all over Europe and traveling around the United States, and people were always saying, does your dad know? And I got to the second book, he still didn't know, and I wrote something in it to that effect, as part of the dedication. Dad still doesn't know. Third one, I haven't heard anything from him. And then the fourth book was coming out, the last Otherland book, Sea of Silver Light. And I was doing a book sign, and this is years that have gone by that Dad is unaware of the fact that he has books dedicated to him. And so I'm doing this our local bookstore when I was living on the other side of the hill over in Palo Alto, California, and Kepler's, which is a grand old bookstore. And I was doing a reading there for, my tour or my whatever for Sea of Silver Light, the last Otherland volume. So I said, okay, that's, we've been through this whole process now. It's been years. Dad hasn't found out, clearly, because he's never said a word to me about it. And so I'm going to, I'm going to make sure he and mom come to the reading, which they, often did anyway, but, come to this event, book signing. And I'm going to make him stand up and I'm going to introduce him as my dad. And then I was going to read all the dedications to him as kind of a practical joke, sort of put him on the spot in a nice way. And so anyway, so I told my mom, I said, make sure dad's going to be there. I've got a little surprise and I really want him there. And so the night of the book signing came and my mom showed up. And I'm looking at her when she walks in through the door and I'm like, oh, dad must be parking the car. No, dad's not parking the car. My mom's there by herself. So about 5 minutes before the whole thing starts, I go over to her and I said, where's dad? And she said, oh, he had some meeting, he's doing this contracting thing since he retired. And I'm going like, I told you I was going to reveal to him that these books were dedicated to him. And she said, oh, he found out not too long ago. He found out. When he found out, nobody told me. How did he find out? And she said, well, yeah, I don't think he can remember where he found out. And I'm like, oh my God, I've gone through all of this. And he doesn't even remember how he found out. Because, why would you? I mean, you got a New York Times best-selling author dedicating books to you. That happens every day. Of course you wouldn't remember, Anyway, so that was basically what happened. That was, and again, I've told stories about my dad before. Lovely man. I love him dearly. He is really a classic science type. He's one of those types when the whole family gets together and everybody comes in, Christmas or whatever, and everybody's hugging and, laughing. And my dad is over checking the thermostat to see where you've got it set. He's a real dad, science dad that way. He likes people, but only because people give him an opportunity to make puns and have someone have to listen to them. That's my dad. Anyway, okay, so now I've brought you up to date. I hope that answers your story. I hope that answers your question on what's going on with what happened with those books and the dedications. All right, I am now going to continue. Excuse me. With Otherland and General Yakubian, who is one of the Grail Brotherhood, has been called in to Bob Wells, who is kind of a Bill Gates character, who runs a company called Telemorphics, which after Felix Jongleur is the most important part of the Grail project. So, and General Yakubian is another Grail project guy, and he and Wells are talking. They don't particularly like being under the thumb of Jongleur. So anyway, so that's what's going on, and they've been using this idea of this escaped person in the network, who we know is Paul Jonas, as a possible way to take some of the power away from Jongleur. Anyway, so that's what we're reading, and Yakubian has just been called in to meet with Robert Wells. The general stood in the middle of the darkened room. Well, where is it? Wells gestured. The 4 wall screens blazed with light. This is a lab, Daniel, but it's not the Frankenstein kind. We work with information here. The toy, as you called it, isn't the kind of thing I can put on a table and point at. Then don't be so damn theatrical. Wells shook his head with mock regret. My people have put a lot of time into something we can't show anyone outside the company. Surely you won't begrudge me a little bit of showmanship. He waved his hand and all 4 screens darkened. A hologrammatic display of small white dots formed in midair in the center of the room. They seemed to move randomly like fast-motion bacteria or superheated molecules. I'll feel more comfortable if I can give you the context, Daniel. So I'm going to explain a little bit of the history of this project. Feel free to stop me if I tell you too many things you already know. Yakubian snorted. Stop you? How? Your security boys took my gun away. Wells favored him with a wintry smile. The problem seems straightforward on the surface. The Grail Project is at bottom a simulation environment, although wildly more ambitious than any other thus far. As part of the experimental procedure, a subject chosen by our chairman, we'll call the subject X for convenience's sake, since we still haven't been told his real name, was placed into the simulation. Sorry, I'm trying to find my spot there. Was placed into the simulation, Wells gestured. An image of a coffin-like metal cylinder festooned with cables appeared, momentarily displacing the dots. It hasn't been easy getting any information about the subject, by the way. The old man is playing everything close to the vest. But apparently X was subjected to various conditioning techniques to alter or efface his memory before they delivered him to us. Conditioning techniques? Yakubian's laugh was short and harsh. And you civilians make jokes about military euphemisms. What did they do, give him a bad haircut and an excessive shampoo? They piffed his mind, Wells. They goddamn well brainwashed him. Whatever. In any case, about a month or so back, there was a disruption of the monitoring equipment and a triggering of the splitting sequence. We still haven't been able to say decisively whether this was accident or sabotage. And contact with X was lost. Contact with his mind, that is, his body is still here on the premises, of course, about 50 feet beneath where you're standing, to be precise. But that means his submersion in the simulation network is ongoing, and we have no idea where in the Matrix he is. Okay, now you've finally gotten to something I don't know, Yakubian said. Why can't we find him? How hard can it be? Let me show you something. Wells gestured again. The glowing white dots reappeared, then froze into something resembling a three-dimensional star map. Wells pointed. One of them turned red and began to blink. The old line simulations were very simple. Everything was reactive. When the subject looked at something or touched it or moved in a direction, the simulation responded. The red dot began slowly to move. The white dots, clustered most nearly around it, resumed their earlier motion, but all the other dots remained frozen. Everything occurred in relation to the subject. When there was no subject, nothing happened. Even with a subject involved, nothing happened beyond the edge of that subject's perceived experience. But this kind of simulation, like the early experiments in artificial intelligence it resembled, made for a very poor version of what it tried to simulate. Real human beings don't think in a linear series of if-then statements, and real environments don't stop changing if there's no human observer. So artificial intelligence experimentation shifted toward artificial life instead around the end of the last century. People started to create environments that evolved. The artificial organisms in these new environments, although very simple at first, evolved as well. An A-life experiment continued all the time, with the various artificial organisms living, feeding, reproducing, dying, whether any scientist was watching them or not. And that's what the new generations of simulations do too, at least the high-end ones. Wells' finger flicked again. The red dot disappeared, but all the white dots leaped into frenetic motion again, some moving slowly, others fast as bullets. Some traveled in groups. Other lone dots roved on what seemed purposeful paths. Whether there is a human participant or not, the various components of the simulation, artificial living things, artificial weather, even artificial entropy, continue. They interact, combine, and recombine, and through this interaction, their individual simplicity begins to approach and, perhaps in some situations, even surpass the complexity of real life. He chuckled. Or RL, as we used to call it. Yakubian watched the sparkle of apparently random movement in the middle of the room. That still doesn't tell me why we can't find this X bastard. Wells summoned the red dot again. He froze the throng of dots, then turned to the general, eyes mild but intent. Okay, Daniel. I'll show you the old-fashioned simulation first, the kind that only reacts to the human participant. Let me just hide the subject. The red dot turned a steadily glowing white. Now I'll turn the whole thing on. The dots sprang to life again, or at least a few of them did, a pulsing swarm that seemed to travel slowly through the mock constellations like a funnel cloud, while the dots on either side remained static. Which one is the subject? Yakubian leaned forward. Gotta be the one in the middle there. That one. No, that one. The cloud froze, and a single dot turned red. Close, Daniel. I'm sure you would have gotten it with just a little more observation. Now we'll try it with a simulation model that's more like the Grail network. The red dot turned white again, then all the dots began to move at once. I've lost it. Exactly. Wells pointed, and the hologram faded. The wall screens lit up in a muted gray etched with an almost invisible shadow of the TMX logo. When simulations behave as much like real life as ours do, there's no easy way to discern which seemingly living object is a human participant and which is just part of the pseudo-life. Yakubian looked around. Wells, anticipating, clapped his hands gently. 2 chairs rose from recessed slots beneath the floor. But it's our goddamn simulation network. The general dropped heavily into one of the chairs. Why don't we just turn it off? You can't tell me he'd still be running around in there somewhere if we jerked out the cord. Telemorphix's founder sighed. It's not that easy, Daniel. If we simply freeze all the simulations on the network, we don't change anything. X is going to look just like an artifact in whatever simulation he's in, and artifacts don't have individual histories that can be checked. They just exist. We don't have enough processors on this planet to keep records of everything that's happened in the Grail project since we went gold with it. And as for actually pulling the plug, Christ, Daniel, do you realize how much time and money the people in the Brotherhood have put into growing these environments? Because that's what they are, grown, self-created by evolution, just like a real environment. Trillions. They've spent trillions and invested almost 2 decades worth of high-speed processing as well. The complexity of this whole thing is almost incomprehensible, and you want to just pull the plug. That would be like going to the richest neighborhood in the world and saying, there's a cockroach loose around here. Do you mind if we burn down all your houses to drive it out? It's just not going to happen, Daniel. The general patted his pocket again, then scowled. But you've got a solution, huh? I think so. We've built an agent. He gestured, and the wall screens began to fill with text. Agent? I thought there were already agents to do this kind of thing. King Tut, or God Almighty, or whatever he's calling himself these days, said he already had state-of-the-art agents involved. Ah, but there's the rub, you see. Not that we know much about those, either. His people have pretty much controlled that part of the project, and Up till now, I've stayed out of their way. But chances are that any agents he has in there, whether human or artificial, are going about their search in the old-fashioned way. Meaning? Hunting for similarities. My people have found out what they could. It's hard to keep anything completely secret in a shared scientific environment, and as far as we can tell, the old man's team have been tracking X since he was put into the network, which means that they've developed something like a behavioral profile, a map of how X has acted in several different simulations. So, whatever agents or tracking gear they're using now, probably compare that map against the behavioral profile of all the units within the network. Yeah? Sounds like the right way to go about it. For a third time, Yakubian patted his pocket. It would be, on a less complex system. But as I've been trying to tell you for a long time, ours isn't like any other simulation network. For one thing, because there's no tracking of individual units, map comparisons have to be made one at a time, case by case. Wells frowned. You know, you really should try to stay abreast of all this, Daniel. It's just as important to you as to any of the rest of us. Yeah? And how much do you know about my end of things, brain boy? How informed are you on the global security situation? Are you some military infrastructure? Touché. Wells at last sat down. All right, let me continue. The problem with trying to make a behavioral match in this old-fashioned way is not just the complexity of the network either. More importantly, the behavioral signature of any free agent will change from one simulation to another. Not much, maybe, but it will still change. You see, almost all these simulations are designed to be immediately functional for a user. That is, if you don't choose characteristics for yourself before entering, the simulation will assign them to you based on its own logic. Therefore, if X is moving from simulation to simulation, he's probably being changed at least slightly each time by the simulations themselves. In this case, the brainwashing, as you so crudely but accurately put it, is working against us. If he has no memory, his sim is probably being shaped by the simulations rather than the other way around. And there's one last problem. Any old-fashioned agents that can move freely through the network will probably have a certain amount of integrity to them. That is, they won't change much. They'll tend to be easy to spot after a while, and since they need a certain amount of time and proximity to the suspected unit before they can make a match and proceed to the capture, X may be able to stay ahead of them almost indefinitely. Shit. So what have you got that's better? We think we have the new state-of-the-art. Wells quirked his lips again. Am I going to be accused of being overly dramatic again? No? Then here. He snapped his fingers and a cable was extruded from the arm of each chair. Plug yourself in. The general pulled out the cable and slotted it into an implant behind his left ear. Wells did the same. I don't see anything. Just a bunch of trees and a lake. That tree there, that's our agent. What the hell are you talking about? An agent that's a tree? Have you completely lost your mind? Now, see this scene? See the woman at the front table? That's our agent. Next one, and that's our agent, the soldier carrying the flamethrower. Yakubian squinted at nothing visible from the outside. So, the thing changes. Blends into any environment. The reason I didn't bring you in and show you some model or drawing or something is because there isn't anything to show. It's the perfect mimic and thus the perfect tracking device. It can fit into any environment. So it's going to blend in. What good is that? Wells sighed. Even if he escapes it once or twice, it still won't be recognized by X because it will never have the same form or figure. And it will learn as it goes, find more sophisticated ways to adapt and gather information. But more importantly, it's going to sift data at a higher level than the old style agents because it's not looking to find matches for a single map. In fact, it's doing the opposite. It's looking for anomalies. So, if it finds an anomaly, boom, we got him. I should digitize you and make you part of my new employee curriculum, explaining to the non-technical. No, Daniel, it's not that easy. Remember, we started this network with less than 100 different simulations, but there must be at least a few thousand by now. I mean, I've got about 40 or so myself. Add to that fact that at any given time there must be more than 10,000 real live humans using the simulations. A lot of our junior members are paying for their place on the Grail Project waiting list by letting their friends and business associates rent time on the network. So, with constant changes in the simulations, living users who are almost impossible to distinguish from artifacts, and, well, suffice it to say, a few other bits of emergent weirdness that we're still studying, what I'm calling anomalies are happening in the tens of millions. But still, our new agent will sift and track faster than anything else, and speed is important. Like it or not, we are in a bit of a race with our chairman. But this baby will be the one to find X and anyone else we ever want to locate. That I promise. He chuckled. You know what we codenamed the agent? Nemesis. The general thumbed the cable out of his neck. Never thought much of those foreign cars. He watched as Wells popped loose his own cable. Oh, for Christ's sake, I'm joking, you pissant. I know about Greek mythology. So when are you going to launch your little monster? Going to break a bottle of champagne over the wall screen? Wells looked a little put out. I launched it already. Even as we speak, it's making its way through the system. Learning, changing, going about its business. Never has to be fed. Never needs a day off. The perfect employee. Yakubian nodded and stood. I'm in favor. Speaking of perfect employees, when you're done with your man Tanabe, let me know. I'm either going to hire him or kill him. Doubt you'll get the chance for either, Daniel. TMX has even less turnover than the military. Our benefits package is very fine. Well, I can dream. Which way out of here? I'll show you. As they walked down a deeply carpeted hallway, the general turned and gently took the founder of Telemorphics by the arm. Bob, we never really went into the lab at all, did we? Not the super clean part where security matters. I mean, I didn't have to be searched just to go into that conference room, did I? Wells took a moment to answer. You're right, Daniel. I did it just to piss you off. Yakubian nodded, but did not look at Wells. His voice was very, very steady. Thought so. 1 to you, Bob. He had never much liked flying. He did it with some frequency and was aware that even with the modern age's traffic-choked skies, it was perhaps the safest way to travel. But this did not soothe the more primitive part of his spirit, the part that did not trust any experience he could not control with his own hands and mind. That was the thing of it. He had no control. If lightning struck the Skywalker on takeoff or descent, storms of any kind were not a problem at the plane's cruising altitude of 105,000 feet. There was really nothing he could do about it. He could kill as many people as he wanted, disrupt the electronic equipment with the strange twist he had inherited from one of his long-dead parents, but that still would not bend an out-of-control suborbital Chinese-made passenger jet to his will. Dread was gnawing at this sour thought, and others like it because the descent into Cartagena was rough. The big plane had been bucking and slaloming for the last quarter of an hour. A tropical storm, the Qantas captain had informed them with studied ochre nonchalance, was kicking up a bit of a fuss in the whole Caribbean basin, and the ride down would be a bit bumpy. Still, he reminded them, they should all be sure to look at the lights of Bogota, which would be sliding past on the left side of the plane any moment now. As the captain finished his sightseeing suggestions and winked off the seat screen, the plane heaved again, a thrash like a wounded animal. Nervous laughter rose above the hum of the engines. Dread lowered himself farther into his seat and clasped the armrests. He had turned off his inner music, since playing his soundtrack would only emphasize that he was helpless, that for a moment he wasn't writing the script for his own Netflix at all. In fact, there was really nothing he could do to make himself feel any better. He would just have to hang on and hope for the best. It was like working for that old bastard, really. Another roller coaster swoop. Dread clenched his jaw, tasting bile at the back of his throat. To add insult to injury, the old man, the would-be god, who was undoubtedly rich beyond Dread's comprehension, still made his employee fly commercial. "Está usted enfermo, señor?" someone asked. He opened his eyes. A pretty young woman with a round face and golden hair was leaning over him, her face expressing professional but still genuine concern. Her name tag read Gloriana. Something about her was strangely familiar, but it wasn't her name. It wasn't the unpleasantly Spartan jumpsuit she wore either, a fashion for cabin assistants that he hoped would pass quickly. "I'm fine," he said, "just not a very good flyer." "Oh," she was a bit surprised, "you're an Aussie too." "Born and bred." With his unusual genetic heritage, he was frequently taken for Latin American or Central Asian. He smiled at her, still trying to figure out why her appearance plucked at his memory. The plane shuddered again. "God, I hate this," he said, laughing. "I'm never happy until I've landed." "We'll be down in just a few minutes." She smiled and patted his hand. "Never fear." The way she said it and the reemergence of the smile suddenly popped the memory loose. She looked like the young kindergarten teacher at his first school, one of the only people who had ever been kind to him. The realization brought with it a kind of sweet pain, an unfamiliar and somewhat disconcerting sensation. "Thank you." He put some energy into a returned smile. He knew from experience that his smiles were impressive. One of the first things the old man had done was send him to the best cosmetic dentist in Sydney. "It's nice of you to be concerned." The captain announced final assent. "It's my job, isn't it?" She made a deliberately exaggerated, cheerful face, and they shared a chuckle. Customs was easy, as always. Dread knew better than to carry anything unusual, leaving even his own perfectly legal hardware at home. You could never tell when you might bump into a border agent who was a closet hobbyist and might recognize and remember serious top-of-the-line gear. That was what carefully nurtured local contacts were for, after all, to supply you the things you didn't want to bring in. As usual, Dread carried nothing more controversial than a mid-level Critapong pad and a few suits in an Insulex garment bag. After a short cab ride, he caught the elevated train across the causeway to the Gethsemane section of the old town, which looked back across the bay from behind the murallas, the centuries-old military walls the Spanish had built to protect their port city. He checked into his hotel under the name Deeds, unfolded his garment bag and hung it in the closet, set his pad on the polished desk, then went back downstairs to run some errands. He returned to the hotel in less than an hour, put away what he had acquired, then went out again. It was a warm night. Dredd walked down the cobbled streets, unnoticed by either tourists or locals. The smell of the Caribbean and heavy feel of the tropical air were not that different from home, although the humidity was more like Brisbane than Sydney. Still, he thought it was strange to come so far and have only the after effects of an 8-hour flight to prove you were somewhere different. He picked a public phone at random and gave it the number he'd memorized. When the call was answered, voice only, no picture, he reeled off another number and was immediately given an address. Then the other party hung up. The hover cab dropped him off in front of the club and grunted away, skirts fluttering over the uneven surface. A crowd of young people in scarlet Mahdi bands and imitation body armor, the Colombian version of Goggle Boys and Goggle Girls, stood in front waiting to be admitted. He had only been in line for a few moments when a street urchin tugged at his sleeve. Many of the visible areas of the child's skin had been burned red raw by the use of scavenged skin patches. The boy turned and walked off down the street, limping slightly. Dredd waited a few moments before following him. They were in the darkened stairwell of an old building near the waterfront when the urchin vanished, slipping away through some unseen exit so quickly and expertly that the man he had been guiding did not immediately notice his absence. Dredd, who had been alert since entering the building for the slight but worrisome possibility of an ambush, was impressed by the child's skill. The sisters chose their minions well, even at the lowest level. At the top of the stairs, a half-dozen old wooden doors ran down each side of the hallway, standing guard over a solitary and rather unfortunate-looking rubber plant. Dredd walked noiselessly along the hall, scanning each door in turn until he found one with a hand pad. He touched it and the door opened, revealing itself to be both thicker than its appearance suggested and hung on strong hinges in a fibramic box frame. The room spanned the length of the entire floor. The other doors were false, at least on this side of the hallway. The exterior windows, however, had been left in place. From the doorway, Dredd had 6 separate views of the seaport and the choppy Caribbean. Except for these Monet-like ocean vistas, the room's white walls, black marble table, and Yiqing tea service were an almost perfect copy of his simulated office. Dredd smiled at the sister's little joke. A light was blinking on the only object of modern furniture in the room, a huge, sleek desk. He sat down, quickly found the retracting panel that contained the connection hardware, and plugged himself in. The room stayed in place, but the Benya sisters abruptly appeared on the far side of the table, side by side, their sims as featureless as 2 parcels wrapped in brown paper. For a brief moment, Dredd was startled, until he realized that he was in a simulation which duplicated the room even more exactly than the room mirrored his own online office. "Very nice," he said. "Thank you for preparing this welcome. Some people find their environment crucial to their ability to work," said one of the Benyas, her tone implying that neither she nor her sister were such people. "Our program is ambitious. You will need to be at your best." "We await the second third of our payment," said the other lumpy shape. "You received the coded list?" Both sisters nodded in synchrony. "Then I'll download one of the 2 keys now." He felt around on the unfamiliar desk for the touchscreen, then opened the account the old man had created and dispatched the sisters one of the pair of encryption keys necessary to access the list. "You will get the other when the operation launches, as we agreed." When the Benyas, or their expert system, had examined the goods, they nodded again, this time indicating satisfaction. "We have much work to do," one of them said. "I've got time now." Although I have something I really must do before too late tonight. Tomorrow I'm all yours." There was a moment of silence from the twin shapes, as though they were considering this as a literal possibility. "To begin with," said one, "the target has changed security companies since we last briefed you. The new company has come in and altered several aspects of the compound's defenses, not all of which we have discovered. We know little about the new company, whereas we had several informants at the previous firm. Which may be why they've changed their security people." Dredd called up the report. The information hung in the air before him. He began to bring up the rest of his array: charts, lists, topographical maps, blueprints. Color-coded and gleaming, they turned the virtual office into a neon fairyland. "How does this change of security affect your program?" "It means more danger to you and the rest of the ground team, of course," said one of the sister shapes. "And it means we will undoubtedly have to kill more people than we planned." He smiled. "What a shame." Even a cursory discussion of the new twists in the operation took several hours. When he had terminated the contact and left his new office, he was feeling stretched thin by work and the flight in. He walked back along the waterfront, letting the soothing sound of the ocean wash over him. As he passed large and imposing office buildings, a small formation of camera drones, activated by motion or his body heat, came swarming out. They overflew him once, then retreated to the shadows, scanning him all the while. Tired and irritated, he resisted the impulse to lash out at this surveillance, to damage or confuse them. It would be a waste of time, as well as foolish. They were only doing their job, monitoring someone who was close to their building after hours. The pictures would be viewed briefly in the morning by a bored guard, then the information would be erased. As long as he didn't do anything rash, that was. Confident, cocky, lazy, did, he reminded himself, walking on without a backward glance. The old man would be proud of him. He walked into his room and undressed, then hung his suit in the closet. He examined his naked form in the mirror for a few moments, then sat on the bed and turned on the wall screen. He brought up his own inner music, a burst of deep sonic monoloco dance dirge in honor of his visit to Colombia. He found something on the wall screen with abstract but fast-changing visuals and turned up the sound in his head until he could feel the bass pulsing in his jawbone. He watched the images flicker by for a few moments, then checked himself in the mirror again. There was something predatory in his long, muscled limbs, in the flatness of his own expression, that excited him. He'd seen that face before. He'd seen that movie. He knew what was going to happen now. As he walked to the bathroom, he threw a few dissonant horn blasts into the music, sharp edges of sound that suggested mounting tension. He brought the volume down as he opened the door. Camera zooms in. Her wrists were still bound to the shower head with tape, but she was no longer standing upright. Instead, she hung with knees bent and her weight on her extended arms in a way that he knew must be painful. When she saw him, she screamed and began to struggle again, but the tape on her mouth reduced the cry to a muted bleat. "I followed you," he said as he sat down on the edge of the bathtub. In his head, with the music underneath, his voice had a deep leading man resonance. I followed your cab until it dropped you at your hotel. After that, it wasn't very difficult to find your room, Gloriana." He reached out to touch her name tag, and she jerked away. He smiled, wondering if she noticed that it was the same smile he'd used on the plane. "Normally, I'd want a more extended hunt,"
A little more sport. I mean, that is what you're here for, isn't it? Soothing the cares of the weary business traveller. But taking you out of there and bringing you up here all in your own suitcase, well, I'd say that was pretty good for spur of the moment, wouldn't you? Her eyes widened, and she tried to say something, but the tape choked it off. Writhing on the shower head, she swayed from side to side. Her blonde hair, so immaculately styled 6 hours ago, hung in lank, sweaty curls. He reached out and plucked her name tag free. It was the electrostatic kind with no interesting sharp bits, so he tossed it aside. You know, he said, I know your name, sweetness, but you never asked mine. He stood and walked out of the bathroom, slowing the music inside him until it was something like an underwater funeral march, deep and heavy and resonant. He came back in with the hardware store bag. It's dread. He opened the bag and produced a pair of pliers and a file. Now, let's get you out of that ugly uniform. And on that unpleasant note, I think we're going to stop for the night, but that is the end of that section. And there's another several page section coming next. So, anyway, I thank you all for joining me. It's a little after 2 o'clock my time. I thank you all very much for joining me. We will continue. We've got a Christabel section coming up. I will be reading again at 7 p.m., but as you all know, this will also be available both on my social media pages and on Chris Fab's YouTube. So you don't have to be here at any time to be able to keep up with the story. And with that, I say again, I am grateful for your presence. I am grateful for your kindness. I hope you are continuing to be kind to yourselves and to those around you. And I will see you very soon. So be good and have a great night or a great morning or a great afternoon or wherever you are and whatever time it is. Anyway, make it a great one. Peace. See you soon.